Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all. You are once again welcome here on the platform of Awakening Consciences on the front page of international news. What Ukraine has just done to Russia on the night of August 28, 2025 is very, very serious. This is very serious. Yes, Russia's response will be unprecedented. Moscow, Russia has been hit in the heart, in depth. Kiev had promised, Kiev is taking action. NATO promised that they are now taking action. You are not without knowing that the day before yesterday, Russia unleashed a combined strike of missiles and drones on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and that. In Kiev, there are 7 sites that were affected, including energy and other infrastructure, and other cities on the national territory had been affected. In total, 13 sensitive sites were affected. What happened the next day was Ukraine's response. The situation is getting worse, ladies and gentlemen. It is this news that we are going to talk about in the context of this video conference that I humbly ask you to share as much as possible. Put a lot of heart. Still don't forget to leave your different opinions in comments. Let's go into the depths. This is an unprecedented offensive by Ukraine. We do not know whether Ukraine has been helped, as quite naturally, Ukraine is always helped by its Western allies, but what happened is unprecedented. Targets hit far behind the front lines tonight. Several Ukrainian attacks targeted infrastructure deep in Russian territory. And I told you, when Ukraine showed their last missile, and this missile, they said it was their own creation. Who is capable of striking 1,000 kilometers behind the front line? I told you that this is a pretext to allow Ukraine to transport the war to the heart of Russia. And that's it. They're on it little by little. About 800 kilometers from the front, railway fuel tanks exploded after an attack, causing a major fire. This is in Russia itself. And you imagine them, the railway fuel tank that exploded in the Samara blaster, the refinery. There is a refinery that is called then Bechev. It was hit by drones, resulting in a massive fire. Russia is on fire. Straight? Yes then. As if all this wasn't happening, there is another refinery in Russia still called Fibsky, that's in Krasnodar, that was also a target, that too is a fire. So you see Ukraine, NATO, therefore Ukraine with NATO. They targeted, they geolocated the energy installations. Russians in the heart of Russia, they struck, yes. So the war is moving. Russia is slowly downloading. So what is there to say? We're not in a trench war anymore, since it was in the trenches in the beginning, right? But we are in a road war, wants to strike in the heart of Russia. The war begins to become downright aerial with disastrous consequences. So Ukraine has just carried out a demonstration of new capabilities. Ukraine now uses long-range drones and carries out sabotage operations capable of well beyond the bottom zone. This is what Ukraine was looking for. For a very long time, as you know, Ukraine has always asked for permission to strike right into the heart of Russia. They refused. Westerners refused from the beginning, but towards the end they all agreed. And finally, when Russia said that, All those who order Ukraine to hit us in depth, if it's done, will hit you too. They pulled out their big game, they helped. Ukraine quickly changed. One of his old ballistic missiles, and then it is said that Ukraine itself produces its own long-range drones. Ukraine itself produces its own drones, its own long-range missiles. And here is Ukraine. Now it is Ukraine that strikes, since it is Ukraine that is at war with Russia. It is Ukraine that strikes neither seen nor known. That is to say that the Westerners are not equipped. Do you see the strategy? So we wonder. Many are wondering what Russia is going to do. Was Russia enjoying it? That the only condition that would push Russia to use maybe nuclear power is when its territory is hit in depth. But there the territory is being hit regularly in depth. Always radiant silence. In any case, Russia believes that using nuclear power is not good at the moment. So what is there to say? Well, it must be said that for Russia, yes, already for Ukraine, eh? It has to be said, this is a military message. Russia can no longer consider itself out of reach in its rear. That's what it means. Russia can no longer consider itself out of reach. Russia is these 2 feet are full in the war now. It is also a political message from Ukraine and NATO. It is about showing public opinion and allies that Ukraine remains offensive and inventive despite the difficulties at the front. So these attacks say one thing: Russian strategic depth is no longer untouchable. Having said that, it was said that the Russian strategic depth was untouchable, but now this depth is touchable. So for Russia, these strikes hit. Vital points, logistics, fuel, rail, refinery. It must be said that this weakens the supply of fuel and ammunition to the Russian army, regardless of the country, whether it turns its cheek on the Russian army. Symbolically, it is a blow to the Kremlin's narrative, which wants to show that the war is far from Russian territory. But war is coming to Russian territory. It is now on Russian territory. It must be said that when the light is green in Théa and Samara, it is no longer only Ukraine that burns, it is Russia itself that begins to burn. So for Ukraine and its allies, this is a strong signal. Ukraine proves that it is not passive, that it can take the war to the heart of Russian territory. This also strengthens Ukraine's image. With its allies who say, yes, Ukraine is capable of doing something. And in all of this overall, can this help to move quickly towards the conclusion of a peace agreement? Your question marks? And so, ladies and gentlemen, that was the news. Thank you for sharing it as much as possible. I'll be right back with new information. It was the voice of your only samurai.